Live from the district. 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 Live from the district.
All right, Mr. Jackson, how are you, bro?
Good, man. Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
It's been a wild week.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's real now. You know, he's
Right.
actually there. He's signing paperwork. Not all of it's legal, but executive actions are happening, and he's already started to shut down a lot of what the Biden-Harris administration built. And so, yeah, it's been a roller coaster. But you know, this is the new reality we're working with.
Okay, so let's back up before we start getting into
Yeah.
the political stuff that's going on right now, and talk about like you know, as a person,
Okay,
how you ended up, you know, being in the White House, working for Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and then we'll work our way up until where we are today. So,
Okay.
who is Gregory Neal Jackson?
Oh, man. Well, I'm actually from Virginia. I grew up in rural Virginia, a place called Fluvanna County. You probably never heard of it.
What's it called?
Fluvanna County. I don't think anybody here has ever heard of it.
So is anybody famous? Chris Brown is not from there. Trey Songz is not from
No,
there.
we got a
Missy
country-
Elliott's not from there.
No. We got a country music artist named Daughtry went to my high school. But,
Oh, wow.
But yeah, there's nothing out there. We have 2 stoplights. It's as rural as it can be. But there's also a bunch of black rural folks out there. My family actually comes from a few generations of black farmers. And so I actually grew up on a farm.
Really?
Yeah, yep. And then went off to college, but was always passionate about politics and making the world a better place. And frankly, I saw how rural poverty impacts our communities too, and how that's often overlooked. And the challenges that we face there as a community are just as serious, if not more intense. And so after college, I wanted to go out and change the world and do something impactful. And DC was like the obvious place to go. So I moved here, started in consulting for the government, was really bored with it. And then this guy
What kind of consulting?
management consulting. I work for FEMA, actually.
Oh, really?
I helped FEMA use Twitter for the first time.
Really?
Yeah, I was the guy that helped
That's a
them
fun
implement
fact.
Twitter. Yeah, they didn't know what Twitter was, and I was like, "Well, this is good information because if the power's out and people don't have the news, they're tweeting." And
Right.
they were like, "What's Twitter?" And I was like, "Oh, okay." So that was my first project when I moved to DC, and then this guy named Barack Obama decided to run. I went down during the South Carolina primaries, knocked doors for the weekend. He won. I loved it. Started traveling with the campaign. He won the entire election. That was exciting. And then they hired me to help with the re-election. So I spent 3 years in North Carolina, actually, where my other side of the family's from, and helped with the re-election campaign. So did that for a while, and then moved back to D.C., back in D.C., and worked for the Democratic National Committee. And while I was in that space of working at the federal level, I was walking home really through the Shaw neighborhood one late night and got caught in the middle of a crossfire and was shot and nearly killed. And the bullet that hit me hit 2 arteries, left me in the hospital 21 days. Went through 6 different surgeries, 6 months of recovery. And throughout that time, really learned a crash course in how serious gun violence is and how it's impacting communities. And frankly, I had been nearly shot 4 times before that. But I guess in America, black
Wait a
in
minute.
America,
Hold on, bro. Wait a minute. You're
Yeah.
just talking about this like getting shot like it's no.
I mean, I don't know how
So-
it's for you, but for me, that was kind of like the norm, right?
So let me
like a
get this-
party happens, people shoot.
So let me get this right, because I haven't
Yeah.
been shot one time. Thank you, Lord. But
Yeah.
and I'm glad you're here with us. So you got shot here in the Shaw District, but you said you got shot 4 other times?
No, almost shot at.
Shot at?
Yeah.
Okay, whew, boy.
Yeah, different parties and
Oh,
situations. Yeah.
Here or in Virginia?
Virginia, here, Atlanta.
Man, where you be at, man?
Just,
I need
I'll
to
be outside. They see me outside.
Wherever you going, I need to stay
Nah,
away
they
from
see me
that.
outside. I mean, I don't know. I felt like it was the norm. And frankly, like, the more I talk to people, like, everyone's been close to it.
Right,
or
yeah.
knows someone who's been shot.
Absolutely.
Or been lost. And it might not be at a party, but quickly realized this is kind of very normal for our community. And, gun violence is the number 1 cause of death for youth in America. But it's been the number 1 cause for black youth since 2006.
Right.
Right. So we're on 20 years of this being the leading cause of death for our young folks. And unfortunately, I survived that more than I had realized. And so when I came out of the hospital, I didn't feel comfortable going back into campaigns and like traditional politics. I wanted to do something more focused on this issue. And so I started by just doing mentorship with some youth as part of the creative school in the Southeast, the Stanton Elementary School. Where we work with youth who are directly from neighborhoods most impacted by violence. Wanted a new job. I didn't want to be in campaigns. I got hired by Muriel Bowser in her first term. Served as her director of community relations for a year and a half. And then, that was all well and good, and bounced around D.C. government for a few years, I think 5 years total. Worked for Parks and Rec, worked for the deputy mayor for Great Economic Opportunity. But then my family friend Trey was shot and killed in North Carolina, in Greensboro. And I quickly realized that all the stuff that we were doing in D.C. to address this issue, it wasn't happening in these smaller cities and smaller towns.
Very true, and I'm glad you said that, because a lot of people don't realize, and this is not just in D.C., that some of the work that's happening, like right now with the Cure model, which is the new model, well, not really new, but it's the model that treats gun violence from a lens of being a health epidemic.
Yeah, that's one of the strategies,
Right, instead of a criminal justice type of thing.
Yeah.
And the strategies that you use in this work are different when you address these communities and these people, and they've been very, very effective. But a lot of people in the rural part of America is not getting these programs at all.
Not even small towns at that time. And so in 2019, I left city government, left campaign politics, and joined a nonprofit called Community Justice. And we started to push. First of all, we surveyed all the solutions that we know can address gun violence. And part of it I learned here in D.C., but a lot of it was looking at other cities. And we brought all that to Congress. And we said, we had the first hearing on urban gun violence in American history in 2019, and said, here are all the solutions that can reduce homicides in our communities. We need your help. And believe it or not, Democrats and Republicans supported it. And they were like, oh, we like this community violence intervention. We know that we like victim services and mental health and therapy for families and grief counseling. Once we start to lay out solutions that were more than just regulating firearms, we started to get real bipartisan support. And so that was kind of the beginning of my pretty stark climb at the federal level, because we took those ideas and I met with some of those members of Congress. We refined it, and we started putting it into different legislative packages for Congress. When COVID-19 hit, when they started to release dollars for essential services or essential employees, we made sure that violence prevention was part of that, so that hospitals that were doing victim services or programs like Cure Violence, right, that are doing street outreach and working in rec centers and communities, that they were being treated the same way a nurse would or a police officer would or an ambulance driver would. We got all of them included. So that meant that $2 billion went to these programs to help them stay strong and really scale during COVID. So that was the beginning. Then in 2022, there was the Buffalo shooting and the Uvalde shooting. I actually went to Buffalo for 2 weeks right after the shooting, and it was crazy. When I got there was literally a parking lot full of cameras. I'm talking about like hundreds of cameras covering the trauma, but there was no government support. There was just a few churches giving out food and, people kind of out there, but there was nothing there was no FEMA style response. And remember, I used to work at FEMA, so I know what it's like when a hurricane hits and all the resources we deploy and the millions and millions of dollars, But when it came to that mass shooting in Buffalo where grandmothers were shot and killed, right, where an entire eastern Buffalo was just shattered, there was no resources or support. And so that's why I started putting pressure on the White House. Like, why aren't y'all here? Why aren't you doing more? If this was a hurricane or a flood or anything else, you'd be here. But because this was a racist man who came here to kill black folks, we don't see you here. And that's where my relationship with the White House really became strong. And after the Buffalo shooting, Congress did a big hearing on mass shootings. And I was asked to testify. So I testified next to mayors, next to some of the survivors, some of the people who lost loved ones or were shot. And then in 2022, we passed the first law on gun violence in 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And out of that hearing, the members of Congress were trying to build this big law. And so I was welcomed into some of those negotiating tables. And it was a big deal. I mean, this law made gun trafficking a federal offense. It put $250 million into community violence intervention. It made sure that domestic abusers are prohibited from getting firearms. It expands our background check system. It makes sure that mental health records are considered when youth are trying to buy firearms. I mean, this bill was huge and historic, and it was bipartisan. And so that bill passed, literally the largest bill in 30 years. And then we went to the White House and said, who's going to implement this thing. Like a bill is just a bill until you have a team that like puts it to work and gets those dollars out and makes these laws real. And then they turned around and said, well, what about you? I said, damn. And so that was kind of my entry to the White House. Was I interviewed with them and led the team to help implement this law and then start to think of new ideas.
And this is under the Biden administration.
Yeah, this was 2023. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's a long story, but that's how.
I thank you for giving us the timeline, because now I got like 800 more questions, bro.
Okay. Yeah.
So now that this great work has happened, we already know that nationally gun violence is down.
Yep.
The District of Columbia, Baltimore, Philadelphia, and other major areas have seen a decrease in violent crime. That's been well documented.
Yep.
Thank you, number one.
Oh, man.
Because we already know that the work that you've done, the work that was done under the Biden-Harris administration is part of that success.
Yeah.
That they need to be you need to be credited for that work. So we're gonna put that right there. But now, do you feel like that things are going to change? Do you think that the funds are still going to be available? How are you feeling about now that you guys had this huge success?
Yeah.
You got this big win. Do you feel like now that we're going to be at a loss under the new administration?
I don't think we're going to be at a loss. I think the momentum may be slowed up a little bit. But there's three big things that we did I want to just put on the table that I think will continue to save lives for decades to come. One was we put out the resources, which you talked about. In total, it was about $42 billion of resources we put into violence prevention.
Wow, $42 billion.
Yes.
That's a lot of money.
It's a ton of money, man.
$1 billion is a lot of money.
No, I know, right? When we started, there was like, so for community violence intervention, for example, there was $0. And we put out $400 million for programs like Cure Violence, like Safe Streets Baltimore, for example. But there was zero federal, so we went from 0 to 400. But we put out like $500 million for red flag laws. We added $2 billion to the Victim Service Fund. So if you get injured or you lose a loved one, the federal government now has more money to give to you and your communities. It's a long list of resources. We added 6 different grants for employment programs in neighborhoods that have been impacted by violence. We expanded some of the like therapeutic programs that exist with the Department of Health to help communities that have been impacted. We even strengthened a program that helps elementary age kids deal with trauma called Project Prevent. So if a child loses their mother or father or big sister, or they witness something, there's now funds that can go to schools. We put $1 billion into our school system to hire more mental health professionals. So you have more guidance counselors that are mental health trained to support kids. So that money's out there. That's a big deal. $42 billion is a lot of money. And most of that's not going anywhere. Like that will continue to help.
Okay, that was my next question.
Yeah.
So will those monies still be available? And for
the majority of it will.
And for how long? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Is it like 2 years?
Yeah. So about $15 billion of it was law for the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. So we got like 2 more years of that.
Right.
About $15 billion of it from the COVID relief funds that will go through 2026, and then there's about $12 billion that we added that is kind of up for negotiation. And it really depends on if Congress keeps the budget as is. Do they cut these pieces? Do they add to it? Mm-hmm. But the good news is the woman who oversees, the senator who oversees our budgeting process, Senator Collins, she is from Maine, a Republican. Mm-hmm. But I was in Lewiston, Maine, too. I spent 2 weeks in Lewiston, Maine, and worked directly with her on recovering from that mass shooting there. And she loved it. And so she actually wrote an op-ed saying, I am so proud of the work we've done and these resources, and we got to keep this going.
Good.
So the one person in charge of the budget, Republican, is enthusiastically supportive of these funds. Now, there's 2 other quick things I'm going to share. So we were the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. When the Biden administration started, there was only 1 at the state level, and there was only 20 at the city level, right? It was just a White House one, and I think we had 1 in California. Now there are 14 at the state level. Michigan, Wisconsin, Maryland, all have offices. And we have over 120 at the city level, right? Greensboro, Memphis just opened their first one, right? So while there may not be a White House office, you now have teams at lower levels that are doing the same work and are actually pushing for more resources locally and implementing policies. So
it's about to be one in D.C. too. I'm gonna just say it.
Oh, you have one. We have one.
Yeah, I mean,
we actually have 2 here: the Office of Neighborhood Safety and the Office of Gun Violence Prevention.
The ones.
Yeah.
And then, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah, that's a whole nother debate.
That's a whole.
Let me one more thing before we go there. The other big thing that I'm excited about, I think will help us continue to save lives, is our approach was upstream accountability. So when we think about law enforcement and criminal justice, from a gun violence prevention, we focused on upstream, which means how do we get traffickers? We actually prosecuted 700 traffickers who were moving guns illegally. They had never been prosecuted before this administration. We shut down 250 gun stores that had violations. We had a zero tolerance policy on violations for gun stores. We shut down 250 of them. We shut down, you know about ghost guns, which is a big issue.
Yeah.
The biggest manufacturer of ghost guns, Polymer 180, we changed the regulations on them, put them out of business.
Good.
So there's no manufacturer of ghost gun technology at that scale anymore. We also shut down 350 websites that were selling Glock switches. And we know switches are a big deal. So we've been cracking down heavy. I mean, we made 36 countries are now prohibited from receiving guns. We can't even export guns to those 36 countries after we change these laws. So we have been really cracking down on the entire industry that's been flooding our communities with guns. And that work can't be reversed. I mean, you can't reopen a business you can maybe loosen those regulations, but that accountability work is done. So I think that's all going to continue to work.
Mm-hmm. So there's a thing in DC that maybe a lot of people in the public don't know about is, and this is not a dig on DC, but in Chicago, Baltimore, some of these other cities that have seen success with gun violence reduction, there's like one umbrella of organization that oversees the work of these organizations. We don't have that in DC.
Right.
That is something that people are talking about right now. Some of my friends in this work.
Yeah.
I appeared in front of what's her name, Brooke Pinto and Adrienne Nadeau for the public safety hearing on gun violence, along with Marcus Ellis, Tony Lewis Jr. And the rest of the Peace Academy. And one of the things that came up was that there needs to be one organization that oversees the efforts of all these organizations that are doing the work. I just wanted to get your opinion on that.
I mean, I think that's definitely a way to strengthen all of the organizations. In Baltimore, they have one organization that's probably the most dominant and the most farthest reaching, which is Safe Streets Baltimore. And there's still small organizations under that. But I think that's right for the most part. I don't know if that's the only solution, though. I think we really need more leadership and more training. Most cities, they have their own type of management training. They have accountability systems. I mean, the city of Oakland does Richmond, California, they do an annual summit where they train all the organizations on budgets, management, innovative approaches to reducing violence. They look at where our weaknesses, where have we not gotten to this community, where did we see a spike in violence, where do we see a reduction, which families are most impacted. Like, there really needs to be a large effort to help lead and strengthen the violence prevention organizations in the city. And we also need way more resources in victim services. That's a huge gap. When I was working at the city, over 500 people were shot a year in the city, and they had a team of 5. Now, I don't know what the scale of that team is now, but 5 people cannot manage 500 families that have been injured. And so we're thinking about, I think in DC, it's been a huge focus on like the street outreach and what are you doing there? But we're not thinking about the therapeutic side on the back end and how do we help people heal. I'll never forget, one of my mentees when I was working with the Boys Institute was Karan Brown. And Karan was shot and killed, and it was tragic.
Oh,
you remember Karan?
The football player from Southeast Kid.
Yeah. And I helped organize his vigil and was there with his mom. And it was so heartbreaking. But man, last year, his little brother was shot and killed. And I had to go back to his house, to his mom, hug his mom for the second time.
Right.
She lost her second baby boy.
Right.
And I'll never forget talking to her. She didn't have resources to get a hotel. Her son was shot and killed outside of her home. She didn't want to stay there. She wanted to stay in a hotel, at least for the first couple of weeks. She didn't want to walk past the yellow tape where her son was killed. But no one had reached out to her. No one had given her any support or resources. And she was in the same situation when her second son was killed as she was when her first son was killed a few years before. And I think that's really telling, because if we're not helping people recover and heal, but also help get them out of the lifestyle or conditions that led to that loss, then we're going to keep seeing this cycle. And right now in DC, we are not doing a good enough job helping families and individuals after they've been traumatized or lost by this crisis. And that's what other cities are doing really, really well. So I think that's a big part of it too. And frankly, we just need more leadership in this area. We don't need members of city council sitting down on, downtown having hearings. We need them in the community sitting down with these families. And whether it's a Brooke Pinto or Breonna Doe, I live in Ward 8. I live on W Street. I need them walking up the street and talking to the families and those impacted to get ideas and solutions and thoughts, not sitting back, at the dais, dissecting strategies that they aren't intimately involved with. I actually worked at the One's office for 10 months. We never had, we had maybe two city council members come there. But as bad as violence was, I feel like everyone should have been in that building almost every week, helping us figure out how to address this crisis. So a lot of work to do.
So I was on your Instagram.
Yeah.
And I saw a web page.
Yeah.
A web page.
Yeah.
That used to be on the whitehouse.gov website.
Yeah.
Is now blank.
Yep.
Let everybody know what that web page was. And I want to know what your feeling is about that being gone.
Yeah. Well, September 23rd, we created the first ever White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. And as of yesterday, it's been officially shut down. And we knew that at the end of the Biden administration that, our team wouldn't be there. But it was still up in the air if what the Trump administration would do with some of these offices. And they made it very clear. I mean, they shut down our office. They shut down the Gender Policy Council, shut down multiple offices. But what that means is that there is no team thinking about how to address gun violence in our country every single day. There is no team that can help communities respond to mass shootings or big surges of violence. And there are no shepherds overseeing those dollars that we know are really critical to get to our communities. And, it's heartbreaking to me. It's really frustrating because, you think once you winning, people will support you. It's like being the coach. You just won the Super Bowl and they fire you. It's like,
right.
Dang.
You feel disrespected?
And they dissolve the team. You're like, we just won a Super Bowl.
Do you feel
twice.
Do you feel disrespected?
Personally?
Yes.
I don't know if they even know who I am, so I don't take it personal.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just very disappointed, and I feel like it's a big hit to our country more than anything. So I'm more frustrated by that, but I'm not surprised. I don't take it personal. I don't think they even know. Mm-hmm. If they do know who I am, then we should sit down and talk.
Right. So do you think that there's a possibility that this administration could possibly come back and say, hey, wait a minute, we need to continue this type of work?
I don't think so. This issue has never been a priority for him or his administration. During the first term, we had multiple tragedies and we barely got a tweet from him, right?
Right.
Let alone a visit to that community. I remember when Buffalo happened, Vice President Harris was front row at the funerals, right? Like, the president when we were in Lewiston, Maine, the president went there I was in the room. He sat down with every family, spent 40 minutes with each family hearing about their loved ones that were lost and how he can be helpful. I mean, we spent 4 hours with those families. But this is not a priority for Trump. And he made that very clear. I mean, he even said it in some of his rallies, like, I did nothing on purpose and we need to get over it. And that's just how it is. And it's nuts. I mean, so I don't think he's going to build anything about it. I think he's just going to scapegoat this issue. He's going to point to the previous administrations or try to pin this on undocumented immigrants, when in reality, we know why violence is happening in our communities. We know it's not just some other group. No, it's the flood of guns into our communities, the root causes that lead to crisis, and the lack of resources to support families and individuals. That's the real problem. And we proved for 2 years in a row that we know how to improve things. But yeah, I don't even think he's in tune enough with our communities to know how big a deal this is, to care about it.
Mm-hmm. So before we wrap up, just curious, man, how was it working every day?
Oh yeah.
In the White House? What was the average day like?
Oh man. Well, my first meeting of the day was in the West Wing at 9-10 a.m. So that's pressure. And I'm not a morning person, so I'm like, so you gotta be on point first thing in the morning with your priorities, what you need, what you have going on, what support you want to see, what resources you want, and what policies we want to push each way. If we ask the president or vice president to do something, we have to brief them. And that was really intense to sit down with Vice President Harris and brief her on, hey, here's the idea, here's the event, here's the speech we want you to give, here's how we think this can have an impact. And she is tough too. She will slice and dice and dissect. I mean, that is high pressure. I mean, the entire experience, while it's exciting and it's, a beautiful building, like every step you take is such high stakes. And it's an opportunity to do something big and transformational. Or if you drop the ball, you miss a moment. Like you miss an opportunity to save lives. And that pressure is intense. But I loved it. I mean, we had, the cafeteria was cool. It wasn't that great. The food was pretty good, but it wasn't nothing outstanding. And at the end of the day, though, the White House is really a vehicle, man. It's never a destination. It's a vehicle. It's a vehicle for you to do what you want to do at the highest level. And that's what was so exciting about it, is to bring a lot of these ideas and solutions from an entire movement of people trying to address gun violence and being able to bring it to the president's desk, and lay it out and make your case. And that's what was most exciting about it. But yeah, I really loved it. I mean, it was a highlight of my life so far. But it's also very competitive too. That's another thing I learned quick is that we're competing with everyone in the building, right? The climate team, they're trying to get their stuff done.
Right.
You got, climate is important, but we're trying to get this gun violence policy done. Well, we got to figure out how we're going to get there before them or around them or after them. So you got to stay on your toes because everyone's fighting to create change. And of course, the president and vice president set the tone and the priorities, but after they set the tone, it's up to the teams on who can bring the best ideas, who can work through it, who can write it up, who can push it, who can change, And so we took it. I treated it like a sport. And my other fellow deputy, Rob Wilcox, we both played football, right? So he was a quarterback, I was a running back. So that's how I was every day. We treated it like a sport. Like, look, we gotta get to the first down.
Right, exactly.
And, so we hustled, man. It's been a lot of late nights there. Slept there a few times. But we knew the stakes were high, that the harder we work, the faster we'll see results. And we also knew that our time was limited. I mean, we had a timer, literally, that we had a guaranteed 422 days. So we made sure we got the most out of every single one of those days, not knowing if we'd be able to come back in the next administration. And I'm glad we did that because now we know we won't.
Okay, in a story format.
Yeah.
Give me one of your favorite memories of President Joe Biden.
Oh, okay. Well, I worked way closer with Vice President Harris because she led our office. But President Biden, man, one of the most amazing things about him is his empathy. And, we had, when Louis Domain happened, you had over 20 people shot and killed in a mass shooting. And we had this whole week-long time where I was on the ground. I'm meeting with the families, meeting with the schools, communities. And he was supposed to come and just give a big speech. And he flew in. I was there kind of getting the families set up at certain tables, at the podium and everything. And they called me in like right before when he landed. And he said, Greg, what do they need the most? And the entire team was like, well, they just need your time. Like the families just need some time with you. And so he scratched the whole press conference. And when the president scratches a press conference, I'm talking about they have a whole extra plane of reporters that come with him. So you have hundreds of cameras, hundreds of people all there just to hear his remarks. He said, scratch it. They took the podium down and he walked in there and I was side by side with him, but we sat down and talked with every single family member. And I mean, like I said, it took us 4 hours, man. He just wanted to hear them, console them because, he lost his first wife and his first child in a tragic car accident. So he has that same empathy and that same pain and trauma. And he just really just consoled all those families and made them, made sure they knew that he was with them, that America was with them. And this wasn't about politics. This was about people and about helping people heal and recover. And I mean, I was on the verge. Really, I was crying half the time, but I was on the verge of breaking down because to see that many families go through trauma, I've seen one or two. My family's been through it, but when you see dozens of families going through that, it'll crack you, man. And to watch him go through all of that in stride was just incredible. And then get back on the plane and leave. And he said, I'm not here for the media. I'm here for the people. And that was huge. And I learned a lot from that moment. And I always will have respect for him, no matter how hard people give him. I know that he really cares about our well-being. So, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Just on a funny note, we also had another event on gun violence. He was giving a big speech. And he pulled our team in, Rob, myself, Sarah, and Steph. And he, pulled us in like a football huddle. And he was like, hey, y'all, I'm really nervous. What do I need to do? And we were like, what? I'm like, what? You're the president of the United States. And he was like, I don't know. What do y'all think I need to do for this speech? We were like, you already got your speech. It's already, you've been practicing. You the president. And I was like, Joe, I didn't say Joe. I said, Mr. President. I said, Mr. President, look, these people are so happy to see you. You already got your words. All I need you to do is just go out there and be as hype as you can. Like, let's just be hype, baby. Like, I gave him like this, you know? He said, all right, I got it. And he went out in that speech, and that was one of the most hype speeches I've ever seen him do. He came out on fire, and I was like, wow. It was like a rally. Like, he was screaming at people, but they were loving it. I was like, yeah. But that was great, because I just never would imagine to be that close where he would just be like, yo, you know, like, you just think you've been in politics for 50 years giving speeches. Last thing you want to do is hear from me. But that was exciting. He was always so humble and just so, you know, I don't know. He would just embrace feedback at every turn, which is amazing because, again, he's like, 50 years. I mean, when you look at the policies he's passed, I mean, he's one of the greatest politicians of all time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Michael Jordan asking you, you know, how does my layup look? Like, you Jordan, bro. I'm just on the sideline, you know. So yeah, it was amazing.
Thank you for those awesome stories. Before we wrap up, what happens next for you, bro? What are you doing?
Well, first of all, the Commanders are going to beat the Eagles.
There you go.
I'm excited about that.
There you go.
So I'm going to get there.
We going to the Super Bowl.
We got to get there. I'm going to be there. Shoot. But no, other than that, man, I'm going to spend, in the short term, just right now I plan to do like some consulting. Like I launched my own consulting firm, and I'm going to help a few different projects. Like the University of Chicago has a leadership academy for community groups who are doing violence intervention. So I'm helping them with their cohort. We're supporting people who are leading efforts in their own communities, whether that's, you know, Delaware or Baton Rouge or Chicago or Durham. So that'll be exciting, like help pour into the next generation. Also working with the National Office of Violence Prevention Network. And we're going to be, I told you about all the offices that were created, working with those offices to help them take advantage of federal resources and design and build their programs out. And also there's some work I'm doing with some school-based efforts to help them improve their violence prevention work, and that's all I got for now, man. Just
okay. Well, you sound like you're gonna be a busy man.
Yeah, I mean, look, we set a very aggressive agenda. We accomplished it. I mean, past the first law in 30 years, moved $42 billion, 54 executive actions. Like, we did a lot in a year. So the future for me, at least in the short term, is to make sure the communities take advantage of the resources and they know what these policies mean to them. So that's what I'll be doing for the next year.
Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming through.
All right, thanks.
All right.
Live from the district. Live from the district.